Pete Sandich was a firefighter pilot, a man who dedicated his entire life to fighting fire, taking risks every time he got in his airplane. He loved his job, and although it was dangerous, he always found meaning in it, burning in the fire of each new dangerous mission. In this world of fear and risk, he felt alive. His girlfriend, Dorinda Durston, shared his profession, but also worried about him, for she too was a pilot, and on top of that, worked as a dispatcher for firefighters. Every dangerous landing he made and every risky maneuver made her heart clench with fear. Dorinda loved Pete dearly, but was constantly on the verge of a nervous breakdown at the thought that one day he might not return. After one particularly difficult and dangerous sortie, when Pete had nearly been killed, Dorinda couldn't take it anymore. The tears in her eyes were genuine, and she tried to convey to him all her fear, her pain. Pete brushed off her concern as usual, saying that everything would be fine, that he always came out alive from the most extreme situations. However, his friend Aliaki, who was also a firefighter pilot, was well aware that this risk could not continue indefinitely. Al offered Pete a safer job, a coaching job in Flat Rock, Colorado. Pete rejected the offer as he always did at first, finding it too boring and not worth his time. Dorinda was on the verge of despair. She could no longer live with the constant fear that Pete would one day not return. It wasn't just anxiety on her part, it was a real longing and worry that grew stronger every day. She approached him, and with each word her voice grew more strained. "I can't go on, Pete, I'm scared every day, I'm scared that you won't be around anymore, that you won't come back." Tears rolled down her cheeks, but she was determined. Pete could not remain indifferent. He realized that he could no longer continue to risk his life without thinking about how it was affecting the woman he loved. He relented and said he would take the coaching job. When Pete made his decision, he may not have fully realized that this decision would change not only his life, but also the lives of those around him. He tried to switch his life around, to start something new, something safe. However, the whole idea couldn't completely overshadow his love for his job, and it was hard for him to leave his job as a firefighter pilot. Dorinda was worried too, because for her, Pete's work had always been not only a profession, but part of his personality. It wasn't just a job, it was his lifestyle, his ambition. Now, however, she saw him calmer, more focused on other aspects of his life. She felt that his joy in what he was doing was beginning to fade, and that worried her. Pete had once agreed to participate in a coaching program in which he was to teach beginners safe flying techniques. But one day, he was given the assignment of delivering equipment to a hard-to-reach location where a fire was raging. It was something familiar, something Pete couldn't leave out. He couldn't leave his comrades behind, and once again he felt his heart fill with that old familiar feeling of adrenaline. He knew this mission could be dangerous, but it pulled him like a magnet. He couldn't stop, so he took to the air again to help. Dorinda was in shock. She couldn't believe Pete was willing to risk everything for this job again. But at this point, she already knew there was nothing she could do to change his mind. As soon as Pete was in the air again, he felt everything he'd lost when he'd settled for the quiet life of a coach come back. He was in his element, and even in the most dangerous situations he felt no fear. He was ready for any turn of events. However, when he once again found himself in the middle of a raging fire, he realized that not everything could be controlled. During one of the flights, an emergency malfunction occurred and Pete found himself in an extremely dangerous situation. At a moment when it seemed he would not survive, his life was saved by the intervention of a mysterious pilot who suddenly appeared nearby. Pete managed to land, but his heart was beating like crazy and he couldn't realize what had happened. It was something supernatural. Once safe, Pete saw the pilot again, but this time he was sure it wasn't just a man. The pilot turned out to be a fire spirit who had once been a firefighter but had passed away. It wasn't just a rescue, it was a moment when Pete began to realize that he had to change not only his outlook on life, but also his priorities. He realized that he could no longer be the man who risked every day for adrenaline. He had to go home and realize that what mattered most in life was his relationship with Dorinda. When Pete returned to Dorinda, she welcomed him with joy, despite her worries and fears. She saw that he had changed, that he was a different person, willing to choose a safer path for the sake of their future. Pete realized that his life didn't have to be full of crazy risks and that he couldn't keep playing with fate. In this moment he found his harmony, his dose of happiness despite his previous addiction to fire and risk. Eventually, he realized that love is also a kind of fire that must be contained and directed to the most important things in life and those you love.